So there's going to be a series of SHE representative awareness sessions. This is not formal training like you will send someone for accredited training. That's a 2-day course. This is just topics that we have identified within our environment that we find that it is just good to touch on. Today is going to be a legal review where we just remind ourselves a bit of what legislation is saying before we go into the more detailed things later on in our series, which will include fire safety, hygiene and wellness. It will include first aid practices, just things to keep in mind, and also machinery, PPE, and so forth. So today, as I've mentioned, we will be predominantly talking about the OSH Act. So we'll be chatting about what is the employer's responsibilities, what is the employee's responsibilities, and then what's the safety representative's responsibilities. Also, we'll just touch on legal liability a bit, and also because of the season that we are in, we will be discussing the COID Act itself, just the importance of the letter of good standing and injury on duty. So next up is just a short video clip for us to start off the day with a bit of humor, considering that health and safety does not have to be this very intense negative experience.
Look at this. Going far. I know it. Oh no, this is not what we expected. You okay?
I'm fine. Ready to go. Well, that's not how it was supposed to go, but they're off.
Okay, so fortunately in these videos nobody got injured, and but it could have been a lot worse, and that is then also why health and safety is so important, because yes, we have those near misses and those minor incidents, but it can get a lot more severe should somebody actually be injured, incapacitated, or the damage is so severe that we will be suffering loss of income or just other financial implications. So the purpose of health and safety is to ensure that people at work and the people influenced by our work is always safe. So it's not just about the people that is working with you and next to you, but also the people that is around you. So in construction, we often have people walking by if we are fixing a property or we're working in the mall. Also, if we are in an office setup where clients come in and they come and meet with us, and there's a wet spot on the floor because the washing of the floor didn't dry properly, and that person can then slip, trip and fall and get injured in that process. So health and safety is about the people we work with, but also the people around us affected by our work. Then also in the Health and Safety Act, the health and safety environmental policy has to be put in place, and that has to be displayed. And this policy stipulates the commitment from the employer side towards health and safety. And then no employee may work ever in an unsafe condition. And that is a very important thing, and sometimes a very difficult thing to ensure at all times, because certain working environments just have specific hazards that no matter what we do, those hazards will always be present. It's just how we manage those hazards that will then avoid people getting injured. So what does the law say in terms of the employer's responsibilities? An employer must, as far as reasonably practicable, implement a health and safety system that protects their employees. Now, this is a costly thing. This has various implications that an employer has to consider when they're looking at their health and safety program that they're implementing to protect their employees. But a few specific duties that an employer must consider is that people must be supervised when they work, so that especially new employees are not put at risk immediately. You need to assess and review the risks that might be associated with the work and then implement mitigating controls. They need to provide information, instruction, and also training to personnel to perform their work safely. So if you're working with a drilling machine, this does not mean you are going to get training on how to operate a forklift. So the training you need to receive is in line with the work you are doing, not just any training. So the information you receive, the instruction you receive, and the training is specific to the work you are performing. And then the employer has to maintain the systems of work, plant and machinery. So this means that we appoint supervisors to protect the employees and make sure that they
Ekskuus Ilse, jou mikrofoon is af.
Thank you. Someone is clicking on my mute button. Can you please not click on my mute button? Okay. So just to then summarize this, that the employer will appoint supervisors to supervise the work that's being done in line with the safety requirements and in line with the procedures and the safe operating procedures. They will also appoint inspectors who are then responsible, whether it is for hygiene and facilities, to inspect the premises, making sure that where you are working it is safe. But they also appoint people for electrical equipment, machinery, to ensure that if there's anything that is not in line, there's a deviation or a fault in the equipment, that's then reported to the employer to have that corrected and rectified. Okay. Then next up, health and safety is not just about what the employer has to do, but also what the employees have to do. So employees must take care of their own health and safety and the people around them. So when you are working, you are taking care of yourself, but also of your colleague. Because if your colleague is doing something unsafe, they are also putting your life at risk. And if you're doing something unsafe, you are putting their life at risk. So in the end, there's a mutual thing going on that we are all involved in health and safety. It's not just the CEO's responsibility to ensure health and safety in the workplace. Some of these specific duties, including following instructions that is given by the employer. This is in the form of toolbox talk, safe operating procedures, training, information that you're given to perform your duties in a safe manner. You also need to assist the employer to carry out their duties. These are usually through appointments to say that you're being appointed with a specific responsibility to assist the employer in making sure that the health and safety is in place. We also have to carry out any lawful order given to us by the employer in terms of health and safety. We need to report unhealthy and unsafe conditions. So we all know that where we are working, there are a lot going on, and it might be that the CEO might not be in that area of the workplace at the point in time where something is unsafe. That's why we then have the responsibility to report this. And we often have safety representatives that the reporting has to be done towards. So either the safety representatives or even your supervisor. If an employee is involved in an incident or an accident, that must be reported immediately within the shift. and that you also have responsibility to take care of your equipment. So if you are issued with equipment to work or you're assigned to work on a specific machine, whether it's a laptop or a drilling machine or a grinder or a iron, those are all equipment given to you to perform your duties, and you need to take care of that. Then health and safety representatives. Health and safety representatives are appointed once a company has 20 or more employees. Now, we at SAR usually advise companies with less than 20 employees also to appoint a safety representative, just because the safety representative can support and assist with certain health and safety matters that you might not have the time for. So health and safety representatives do have a responsibility and a function within the company to assist with the health and safety compliance that you need to implement. So some of the specific duties is health and safety representatives must be trained and appointed. So you cannot just appoint a safety rep if they did not receive the safety representative's training, because that training specifically helps them to understand what their responsibilities and their roles are that they need to fulfill. Representatives are usually requested to be involved in inspections, investigations. So if there's an incident, they'll be involved in investigations and audits, because a lot of what's happening during those inspections needs to be communicated also to the employees to ensure that this compliance is achieved. They have to partake in identifying the risks and hazards and the work in the workplace, and then also report on it. So you will do a risk assessment maybe once a year, but the in-between hazards and risks that changes day to day has to be reported, and they need to keep that in mind and be on the lookout for the risks that might be associated with the work on a given day. They need to communicate health and safety instructions from the employer to the employees, and then also communicate any concerns from the employees to the employers. So they have a bit of a in-between responsibility to help with communication, because a safety rep is also someone who's usually got a rapport or a connection with the employees that's different to what we have as managers or employers. That relationship changes. And then during committee meetings, they can make recommendations to improve the health and safety in the workplace. So you usually have a committee once there are more than 2 safety reps in the workplace. And that is when you have the moment you are in manufacturing and you have more than 50 employees, you will appoint your second representative. And in a general office space, the moment you have more than 100 employees, you will be appointing your second representative. Again, with the training facility or the training that SAR provides, which has a doesn't have a cap on how many representatives you can train if you're part of our training program, then having more than 1 representative is beneficial, because if the one is absent, there's always another one to stand in. So with SAR's training product, there's definitely an advantage to then have more than 1 safety representative in the workplace. So here's the next little video, just about some general safety rules to keep in mind when you are at work, just overall, whether you're in an office or whether you're in a factory, warehouse, butchery, or even on the construction site, there are certain general safety rules that's always applicable for everyone.
In this lesson, I'll discuss general safety rules for the workplace. First off, no horseplay. Running and throwing objects around a shop or job site is unsafe and potentially dangerous. Next, keep it clean. Good housekeeping and organization are mandatory at any job site. So that means keep your tools clean, properly maintained and properly stored when not in use. Avoid falling hazards. Don't place tools or materials on overhead areas where they could fall and injure others. And use proper lighting. To avoid injuring yourself due to lack of light, always carry a flashlight or trouble light with you. And lift properly. Use proper lifting techniques to avoid injuring your back. And use your safety equipment. Those gloves and masks are there for a reason, so use the appropriate safety clothing and equipment required for the job being performed. And keep an eye out for any broken items or tools. Defective equipment must be tagged to inform others not to use it, and the defective item should be removed or replaced as soon as possible. Similarly, all accidents and injuries, regardless of size, must be reported to the appropriate person. And to avoid accidents before they happen, be aware of the state of your health and any changes in it. Even a minor illness can affect your sense of balance or your reaction time. And never work impaired. Impairment by alcohol or medication can greatly affect your perception and reaction time and is extremely dangerous. And if you see any unsafe conditions or safety violations, report them to your supervisor so they can be corrected immediately. By following these simple rules, you will help keep yourself and others safer on the work site. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so they basically now just touch on the same things we've just spoken and mentioned a flashlight. And I think with load shedding about in South Africa, a flashlight is quite something to keep on hand. You'll never know when you might need it, especially if you're working in a basement or in an enclosed space where lighting is very poor. And then on the topic of impaired, we are now going into the season where our health is often affected. So if you are taking medication that can make you sleepy or drowsy, then it's very important to bring that to the attention of your employer so that you don't end up driving a forklift or even a normal vehicle, a truck, and then putting yourself and other people's lives in danger because of the medication that you are using. And when you are going to the doctor and they prescribe you medication, then check in with them whether the medication might have an impact on whether it's making you sleepy or drowsy, because that affects your ability to perform your work. And of course, we don't want to be impaired when we are working. Okay. Then next up is legal liability. So legal liability is just a short part that I want to discuss and share with everyone. So a person is legally liable when he or she is financially responsible for something. So in most cases, an employer is taking the primary responsibility in a company that makes them liable should something go astray. And this is both on the civil side and the criminal side. So civil side is where a person ends up suing you for something that you've done wrong, according to them, against them. So you have caused them harm. And then also on the criminal side is when we are breaking the law. So if we don't follow the laws or the rules of the Health and Safety Act and its regulations, then we are breaking a law, which means we are then criminally liable for that. And legal liability can be imposed, what they say, both jointly and separately. And that means that if the employer and someone else in the company is responsible for breaking the law, then they can be separately, so each one by themselves be held liable, but also together be held liable. And there's a specific section within the Criminal Procedures Act that covers the whole part of health and safety, where people are then charged should there be something wrong. So if we don't make sure that we keep the workplace safe, then we end up breaking the law, which then puts us at risk of being either imprisoned or being fined with big fines, or even both. So you can go to jail and be responsible to pay a penalty. So it's very important for us to try to implement the health and safety in the workplace as best as possible so that we don't put ourselves at risk of any of these legal implications for not complying with legislation. And then finally, workmen's compensation. So now from the 1st of March until tomorrow is the renewal of the letter of good standing for anyone who's associated with Rand Mutual Assurance, RMA. RMA has their renewals from the 1st of March to the 31st of March. And if you are then late with your renewal, there are then, of course, also implications. And then if you are with the workmen's compensation, so the government side of things, then your renewal time is now from 1 April until 31 May, during which you then have the opportunity to submit your return of earnings. And then these return of earnings are then processed, and then there's a fee to pay. And once you've paid this fee, you then receive your letter of good standing. Now, a letter of good standing is there to protect the employer from any civil claims. So if you have an injury on duty, the person cannot go and make a civil claim against you because you have workmen's compensation already in place. And also it protects the employee so that the employee knows that should something happen to him or her or them in the workplace, they will be able to get treatment without having to worry about the financial implications related to this. So this is then for submitting injury on duties, diseases on duty. Diseases on duty includes asbestosis. So if you work in an environment where you're working with asbestos, silica, where you're working with a lot of dust, especially in the mine environment. And also another disease that was quite common in the past few years was COVID. If you had contracted COVID in the workplace, then you were also covered for diseases on duty, where there were certain funds covered by the workmen's compensation or Rand Mutual Assurance. Now, all incidents must be reported to your safety rep or your injury, the person responsible for your injury, your incident investigations. This is near misses. So any, like that first video where no one got injured, those are considered near misses. Then we have first aid incidents. This is cuts, bruises, potential damages or injuries to a person that is not necessary for hospitalization. So you don't have to be removed from the workplace and taken to a hospital or a doctor. And then minor and major incidents, this is where you need to go outside of the first aid environment to be treated for your injury, whether it's a broken arm or a laceration, stitches, or even a few days in hospital that's necessary for workmen's comp then to pay. Also, disabilities, amputations, and fatalities that must also be reported. And this includes any person that's booked off for more than 14 days. So if you sustained an injury and you've been booked off by the doctor for more than 14 days, even though it's just a minor or major incident, it falls under disability because the duration that has to be paid out by the Department of Labor then changes. Okay. A big reason, guys, and I want to emphasize this with first aid, if anyone in the company sustained even a scratch, you need to report it because you don't know what the health condition is of that person. And it might be that in a week's time or even in a few days' time, that scratch that they sustained at the workplace turned into infection, and now we have more severe implications. And if you didn't report that scratch on the day it happened, then it means that 3 or 4 days later, you won't be able to submit a claim against workman's compensation because there's no proof or record that the scratch you initially sustained was at the workplace. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then, as mentioned, this must be reported to your SHE-Rep, incident investigator, or the line manager. That's the points on workman's compensation. And then for the employers, I know when it comes to workman's compensation, the fees are sometimes exuberant because it's based on the percentage of your payroll. And this is an amount that you suddenly have to fork out. There are protocols in place to allow you to make payment arrangements where you can then pay your amount over a period of time, whether it is 6 months or 12 months or depending on the arrangement that's made. And then for our labor and our OHS clients, you of course can always contact the COID division within the OHS team, who will then assist you with any of this, whether it's your IODs, whether it is diseases on duty, uncertainties about whether it is an injury or not, uncertainties about payment arrangements, or whether you're up to date with workman's compensation. You can always contact the COI team. They will be able to assist and advise you. And you then don't have to worry about going to the Department of Labor to find an answer that takes several times. Okay. So that is the last part of the presentation. There's one more short video clip, and then we will have an opportunity to just go through some questions if there is any questions that you might have asked during the session or that you want to ask now at the end.
Working from home can be great for you and your employer. Here are some tips to make sure you're working safely. Adjust your chair so your feet are flat on the floor and your lower back is supported. Clear away tripping hazards, such as loose cords. Place your computer screen an arm's length away with the top third at eye level. Use extra lighting for close-up tasks. If you use a laptop, consider adding a separate monitor, keyboard, and mouse. Take regular breaks to walk, stretch, and rest your eyes. To learn more about working comfortably and safely at home or at the office, visit safe.com/ergo.
Okay. So just on the topic of working from home, it's also part of the responsibilities where we then as employees need to take extra care when we're working from home so that we don't sustain injuries at home, because at home then becomes the workplace that has certain responsibilities, and the OSH Act then covers us in that regard, saying that you as an employee must take all care in terms of your own health and safety. So when you are working from home, sitting on the sofa is not ideal. Having cables lying around because you need to get power from the one side of the room to the next side, kids' toys and all those things needs to be taken into consideration when we're working from home as well. And if you are a safety rep with a company where you do work from home, it's important to make sure that your team is also aware of just taking care of themselves when they're working from home. In the end, we all want to go home safely. Thank you very much.